Libertarians interviewed on his show Andre Maru when he was running for president in 1992, John Kuhn when he's running for state senate, and also Harry Brown when he's running for president in 1996, which is something I appreciate very much. And what we're going to do is this is going to be a dialogue today. David's not going to make a long speech. He's got a few remarks he'd like to say. And then we're going to ask David questions. He's going to ask us questions. If you have a question or you want to, that you want to answer, or just raise your hand. And then when you're recognized, please stand, identify yourself, introduce yourself. If you're doing something for the party, you can mention that. And now I'd like to introduce the person who made today's meeting possible, Pamela Tucker, who's a good friend of David's and invited him. Pamela?
Thank you very much. I've only been a member of the Libertarians for a couple of years, and so I very much appreciate the opportunity that you've given me to introduce David. David's been a fixture in Detroit radio now for, say, about 24 years. He started at the old WXYT radio, which I think you remember. He moved then to WJR, and then back to WXYT, WJR again. And I think I heard it said that you're nobody in radio unless you've been fired at least a half a dozen times. For those of you who've listened to David over the years, I'm sure you've been impressed, as I've been, not only with the astuteness of his political knowledge, but the depth of his knowledge on other topics like golf and cars and movies and history. I think you'll agree with me that there are very few talk show hosts, in fact, I think very few political commentators, period, who can match David's eloquence and wonderful satirical sense and very sharp insight.
Absolutely.
To say that. No, So like Bill has said, David has prepared a few brief remarks this afternoon, and that he wants to learn as much from us as possible. So please be prepared to ask David your most challenging and thought-provoking questions so we can have an interesting dialogue. So it's my distinct pleasure to be able to introduce to you from WJR Radio, David Newman.
Thanks so much for coming. Pamela, you know, is a collaborator of mine.
Yes.
I don't know if this is why you know. Pamela is a marvelous satirical actress, and she has been the best spoof partner I've ever had over the 20 years or so that I've been doing these spoofs. I've worked with 4 or 5 different people, and no one comes up to the level that Pamela's been able to achieve. As Susan Gunning Bedford, descendant of a signer of the Constitution, lobbying for the repeal of the 22nd Amendment so that Bill can run again. She was wonderful. I think she pissed off a few people. Oh, we were hearing about it for days, and a lot of people didn't hear the punchline. Who was that woman? I will never listen to your program again.
Oh dear.
The great line, which she beautifully ad-libbed. Just we talked about it for like 15 minutes. She has this wonderful kind of just ability to gather the idea and embroider it and make it her own. We talked briefly, and then she gets on. This guy says, "Look, I can't believe you have this woman on the air." She responds, "My great-great-grandfather was signing the Constitution while yours was scratching in the dirt." You think that guy was pissed off? Great job. You've got another career back to the current one is running the career. As Bill and Pamela mentioned, I don't really have a whole lot in a prepared sense to talk about today. I want to learn as much as I can. I don't really feel qualified to speak in any coherent sense about the depth of libertarianism. I just don't know enough about it. I made a few notes, which I will share with you now. I wonder if libertarianism aspires to be a mass movement. It isn't right now. I think we can say that. It is on its way, perhaps. But how do you achieve the mass popularity necessary to achieve real and true political power? What are the methods? This is what I want to find out from you folks today. What are the methods that seem most promising in the way of achieving a much larger measure of political power and influence in this country? Do you want it? I mean, you libertarians. Do you want it, or do you want to sort of insert the ideas of libertarianism into our national bloodstream and have them become an influence without the parties necessarily affixing a label to it, right? You appreciate the difference. There are movements which gradually promote their ideas into our national consciousness without necessarily our noticing it at the time. Is that what libertarianism aspires to? One slightly negative proposition, which I will put to you and see what you do with it, is how in the world do you counter the culture of dependency that began with FDR and the New Deal? Because when you think back on it, government, central government, was not much of a factor in our lives until FDR and the New Deal and the collapse of faith in capitalism that came with it. The people who can make or break political institutions lost faith with capitalism. And the New Deal rushed in to fill that void in a way that they never could have before. Government was a pale shadow of what it was to become, but central government. In other words, the enemy, it seems to me, of all that libertarianism stands for, the nanny state, the interventionist state, the all-encompassing power of central government, which is the antithesis of everything that I understand libertarianism ought to be about, gains its biggest impetus from the Depression and FDR's response to it. And it's been there ever since. It's been there like the zebra mussel. It arrives, there's no natural predators. Wow, Social Security, what a great idea. Everybody gets a pension, and we start getting them right now, and it's free to the first recipients. I mean, that kind of thing. No, it has counterparts today in, for example, the prescription drug initiative of this administration and so on. That kind of swindle, that kind of statist bait and switch begins with FDR and the New Deal, and it has never left us. It gained additional impetus with Lyndon Johnson, for example. And as I was talking with Tim O'Brien before, it seems to me that Lyndon Johnson, if there are two villains in the sense of the accretion of federal power and our dependency as a nation, I mean mass dependency on all that government can do for you, central government, the number two villain, and very, very close behind FDR, is Lyndon Johnson. The irony of this being portrayed as an enemy of the left because of his advocacy of the Vietnam War is very powerful, because if the fools could only see it, he's their guy. He is the guy who establishes so much of what we now take for granted in terms of entitlements, Medicare and Medicaid, and that swell critter, which has all the different permutations and what's the word I'm groping for? The mutations, not permutations, affirmative action and set-asides, and all that evil family begins with Lyndon Johnson. So the nation has established this awful relationship with central government, which libertarianism will have hell's own time to break. That's one of the things I want to find out from you guys today. It set in motion a kind of doomsday machine, in other words, in which all this wonderful stuff is promised.